Welcome, everybody. My name is Keith Pabian, and I really appreciate Beth and Sherry allowing me to speak today. This is a very, very, very important topic, especially because one of the big themes that I'm going to cover today is how we're really in a new world of H-2B visas. So I know all of you are still in season, but we are only about 2 weeks away from starting work on next season's petitions. And so my goal today is to get everyone ready, understand the landscape, understand what you're about to get into in a couple of weeks. And for those that might not know what H-2B visas are, we'll definitely cover some basics as well. So just a quick little bit about me. I am actually based up in Massachusetts, but we have more clients in Florida than any other area of the country. So I actually own two companies at this point. Pabian Law is a national immigration law firm. We have about 50 people on staff at our office. And really what we've become is a hospitality law firm. We work with primarily private clubs, lodgings, and ski areas are our main focus groups. Work with a ton in South Florida, North Florida, Panhandle, and then all across the country on H-2B visas and year-round options. Seasonal Connect is my other company. I started that along with my business partner, Carly, during the pandemic. And the goal of Seasonal Connect is to allow employers to connect with one another so that they can offer opportunities for workers to go back and forth between seasons, and also just to find workers. You can actually search this massive database of workers, and you can search for in-country H-2Bs, out-of-country H-2Bs, Americans, J1s, to allow you to staff for your busy seasons. So with that, let's get into this because we have a lot to cover in the next bit. I'll also leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And so if you want to write questions into the Q&A box as we go, I promise I'll make time for the questions when we get to the end of this. All right. So what I thought is, as we're looking ahead to next season, okay, because just to reiterate, we are starting work in 2 weeks on winter season visa petitions. And in this theme of it being a whole new world of H-2B visas, it's almost impossible at this point to catch you up if you don't start on time. So what I thought I would start with is just the general themes of what we're getting into looking ahead to next season. And then we'll back out of that and go into the weeds of these a little bit. All right. So the first one is employers struggling to understand that we are in this new world. For literally decades, clubs in Florida have had the opportunity to staff the way you want. When it comes to H-2Bs, go out of country, in country, frankly, push back on northern clubs and other northern organizations in terms of when you release people and when you're demanding the workers to come. I used to, when I've spoken in Florida in prior years, I used to say to you guys that you were lucky and you got to really push back on the northern organizations because they needed you. That is no longer the case. Everyone needs each other, and it is definitely this brand new world that we're in of timing, of the importance of deadlines, and just understanding that this is a big work process that's going to feel more cumbersome and more work than it ever has before. And frankly, I think that a lot of clubs in Florida have taken for granted that you've been able to do things a certain way. And one of my goals of this webinar is to make sure that you leave understanding that we really are in a different type of process now. And while the laws haven't changed, a lot of the internal workings of the government have. So that's one thing. Second thing, which goes hand in hand with that, is unprecedented demand. The American workforce, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, just seems to have evaporated during COVID. And so as a result of that, more and more organizations are turning to H-2Bs. And it's no longer just the hot spots of H-2Bs, right? The areas that used to do H-2Bs in such large numbers, the South Floridas, Cape Cod, the Mackinac Islands in Michigan. Now we're talking about all over, just about every state. We have organizations reaching out to us from every state asking about this. Even like city clubs are looking at this. And what that means is that there's so much more demand and there's only a limited supply, which we'll talk about. All right. This is one that's very real, and this is kind of going into this whole new world. There's a very, very, very real possibility that the H-2B winter season cap gets hit in October this year. Okay, I'm going to talk more about that as we go, but I want you to start thinking about this of what would your staffing look like if you can't bring in out-of-country workers for your winter season. All right, and then the other one is government delays. The government has not caught up from COVID and a lot of the Trump era initiatives. The Biden administration has not done a lot to fix these, and we're still stuck in this model where the government is actually more backlogged today than they were even last year, which was just the worst they've ever been. And it's affecting when you get your workers, the workers coming in from out of country, and just causing a lot of people to have a lot of sleepless nights. So we'll talk more about that as well. All right, so now that I've hopefully scared you a little bit and kind of laid this out, let's start with the basics, because I don't ever want to assume that everyone understands everything about H-2Bs. And I know that there's going into that theme of more and more organizations looking at this. I would venture to say that there might be a few clubs on this webinar that might just be considering doing this for the first time. All right, so what is the H-2B? One thing I will tell you is we did a basics webinar at our firm yesterday for H-2Bs. If anyone wants a recording of that, just send me an email after this webinar and you will hear an entire hour of just the basics of H-2Bs. But for purposes of today, what an H-2B visa is it's by definition a seasonal visa. In the H-2B visa laws, you have to be seasonal in order to get it. It's actually the main piece of who qualifies for an H-2B. You can apply for up to 10 months. However, you can only apply during your busy season. So if your busy season goes from October through mid-May, that would be the season that you would apply for. All right. Most of the petition process is actually based on the job category, not the people. So when you're thinking about H-2Bs, what you want to be thinking about is what jobs are you short? Are you short on line cooks, dishwashers, servers, busser runners, front desk, housekeepers, whatever it might be? That's the way the process works. It's all about the job category. You have to apply every single year. So every year you go through this process. What's nice about that is you can make tweaks. So let's say this year you feel like you're really short on dishwashers, but for some reason you start to see an influx of dishwasher applicants next year. You don't have to go through with every position each year. Or on the other side of that, if you just can't find people that you used to be able to find, you can apply in that year. You get to set the requirements. So for a lot of you, you have very high standards at your clubs, and you could say, we're not going to accept a server unless they have 6 months of fine dining serving experience, and that's totally fine. And hypothetically, the workers can come from outside the US, or they could transfer to you from a northern organization. Northern could even be within the state of Florida, right? The Panhandle is a summer season, and they can transfer to you within the country for your season. Those are called in-country transfers. All right. In terms of the requirements, there's a minimum wage component called the prevailing wage. Every single club that I've worked with in the entire country over the last 2 years has been way over, because you've all had to raise your wages as you've been trying to recruit. There's this 35-hour per week minimum. You apply for either 35 or 40 hours. You can apply for time and a half. There is this provision that allows for you to dip down on hours in the event of a natural disaster or things like that. So when there have been hurricanes in Florida, we've been able to use this 3/4 rule to allow you to cut the wage, to cut down the hours for a very brief period of time during your season. H-2Bs to the government are an employer benefit, right? To the government, they're saying that you get to do this. You get to employ international workers because you can't find Americans. So this is a benefit to you. And so as a result of that, the government mandates that you pay the fees associated with H-2Bs. The only cost that you can charge back to the workers is for housing. Although a lot of you at this point are subsidizing housing because of the competitive recruiting market for H-2Bs. You always have to get workers to you for the start of the season. So whether the workers are coming from outside the country or if they're transferring to you from inside, you always have to fly them to Florida, to your club, for the start of the season. You're only dealing with outbound travel if they work the whole season or you fire them for cause and they're going back to their home country. So if they're transferring to a northern organization following your season, you're not responsible for outbound transportation, right? One of the most important laws when it comes to H-2Bs is that you treat the US workers and the H-2B workers the same. So the US workers are in the same, who are in the same role is what I should say. So any H-2B worker and any American worker that's in the same role as the H-2Bs, you have to treat them the same across the board when it comes to benefits, pay, working conditions, and so on. There's a ton of compliance and retention mandates. And frankly, there's a lot of other requirements that I'm glossing over. One of the whole themes of this new world is a lot of you have been guilty of using recruiters for the legal process. And this is a legal process with legal obligations and legal mandates and legal fallout. You need to use a law firm for this. All right. Recruiters are there to find workers, not to go through the legal process. So make sure that you have a lawyer working with you. And I will tell you, there are some recruiters that definitely represent that they have lawyers on staff and they don't. So you really want to make sure that you're working with a lawyer when you're going through this. All right. Popular jobs. Basically, it's front of house, back of house when it comes to food and beverage, housekeepers, front desk, grounds on the golf course. And then we're seeing more and more maintenance and engineering and then retail. And then we see this for ski mountains as well. I always put this because one of the things with H-2Bs is workers can come and try a new job with you. The way you structure the experience requirements, you could have someone that in the past might have been a lift operator now doing golf course maintenance for you. That's totally fine if you structure it the right way. In terms of housing and daily transportation, this is something that's not required. If you do, so what I mean by that is there's this misconception that in the laws, you have to provide housing and daily transportation to H-2Bs, and that is not true. The issue is that workers are going to want to understand where they're going to live and how they're going to get to work. So you want to try to figure this out. One of the biggest issues in Florida right now is that housing is so expensive and the availability of housing is so difficult, right? Like we're seeing the workers getting pushed further and further from the work sites because the housing has just gotten so expensive. But that being said, you're going to want to try to figure this out for workers and at least have the answer, right? Where are the workers going to live and how are they going to get to work every day? All right, so that's the basics. Let's just talk about the process. And this goes directly into understanding how you prepare for next season. All right, so here's the thing, right? We start the process in 2 weeks at our office. So on April 1st, we hit the ground running. Internally, we're actually starting work this week on winter season petitions for next year. And so you need to be really careful. If you're in the north part of Florida, we start your summer seasons mid-September. But for the vast majority of you, you're in South Florida, we hit the ground running in 2 weeks. All right. Even though your seasons are still going on, we're going to start next year's process while you're finishing up the current season. All right. I want to show you this very important piece of this. Okay. First of all, this is the process from a very high level piece. Okay. You don't need to know this, but I want to show you a few different things. First of all, everything is based off of your start date. Okay. So what we do and what everyone does is if you tell us your start date is October 1st, we put it into our calendar and we use these dates down here. We use much more exact dates, but that's the way your process goes. That's number one. Number two is the way that the process works, the amount of information we need expands as we go. So even though we're starting the process in 2 weeks, we don't need to know a lot of information in 2 weeks. We don't need to know who the workers are. We don't even need to know numbers. All we need to know is what job categories are you filing for and what is your start date and end date of each position, right? So we would need to know, for example, that you need servers from October 15th through May 15th, as an example. Couple of other things I want to show you, okay? Number one is one of the earliest things we do is file this prevailing wage application. Now, what's weird about the H-2B process, one of the many weird things, is we can actually look up the prevailing wage online. So we can make sure that we know what the wage will be before we even start the process to make sure that this is doable for you. But despite all of that, we still have to file this with the Department of Labor. Now, Keep that in mind for a second as I go to this thing, all right? 3 months from the start of the application, we file your applications with the Department of Labor. When we file this, we need the prevailing wage back from the Department of Labor. We cannot file this unless we have a prevailing wage back from the Department of Labor, as well as all these other things that we need from clients, right? The seasonality evidence, the numbers, and so on. This application that we file with the Department of Labor, we can only file in a 2-week window. We can only file this 90 to 75 days before your start date. If we file it 91 days before, it gets denied. If we file it 74 days before your start date, it gets denied. This is why we can't catch you up, right? If you start late, we're stuck because we can only file this in a 2-week window. In addition to that, if we start late, remember, we need this back from the Department of Labor, and we're going to talk more about government delays. And one of the things that they're delayed with is issuing prevailing wages. So there's a lot of work that goes into this. It's a long process. There's multiple government agencies involved, and it's become virtually impossible to catch clients up. The other thing is, I told you there's a 2-week window in which to file this. We don't want to file this on the last day, right? We want to file this the first day possible because we're going to talk about the cap. We're going to talk more about delays and so on. So as we're going through that, just keep this in mind. We are stuck with this very rigid process. And what my job is to make sure that we keep our clients on track going through this, filing the first day possible to mitigate any risk caused by delays and the cap and all these things we're going to talk about. All right. So that's why we can't start early, right? One of the things when I say that I get the question sometimes is, why don't we just start 2 weeks early? And the answer is we can't, right? We're stuck. And the other thing is we don't want to start too early anyway, because every year when we go through this process, we have to prove seasonality. We have to prove that you are seasonal to the government. We have to provide records of your revenue, your expenses, your staffing to show the seasonality. And you guys are living that seasonality today. We want to try to provide as full of a picture as we can. So if we start too early, it would just require more work for you to supplement some of that. So we can't start too early, but we have to start on time and we have to stay on time. All right. Another question I get a lot, and it's worth just covering this here briefly. I said before that there are 2 ways to get workers. One is that they can come from outside the country. The other is that they could transfer to you from another organization with an H-2B visa, right? So let's say Beth has an H-2B visa. She's working up in Cape Cod. You want to hire her. Do you still need to go through this whole process that I showed on Tuesday, this whole process, right? That takes about 6.5 months. Do you still need to go through this whole process if Beth already has an H-2B for another organization? The answer is yes, right? Just because someone has an H-2B does not mean that you can hire them. This whole process is really about getting your club authorization to employ international workers, and you cannot skip this. You have to go through this whole process regardless of who the worker is that you're hiring and where that person is. All right. Now, let's get into the topical things for this year, okay? So this is where, so I want to pause for a second, right? Up until right now, everything I've told you, I would say the same thing each year. Now what we're starting to talk about is the 2023 to 2024 season specific things. All right, we're going more into the weeds of some of the themes that I talked about earlier. Okay, most of the issues, most of the themes that I covered are really caused by what we're talking about here. The demand for H-2B visas has never been higher. It is ridiculous, okay? Now, first we need to understand what I'm talking about. So the H-2B visas have this numerical cap associated with it. And this numerical cap is maddening. So in 1990, when H-2B visas were introduced, Congress set this numerical cap on how many H-2B visas it issued every year. The government uses an October 1st fiscal year start. Okay, so October 1st is when the government year starts. What they do is for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, they allocate half of the visas, and then the second half, they allocate the other half. So from October 1st, first date of the fiscal year, all the way through March 31st, there are 33,000 H-2B visas available. Then from April 1st until September 30th, the other 33,000 are available. These H-2B visas only are applicable to workers coming from outside the country. So Beth, who is up in Cape Cod, who wants to transfer to Florida, she does not count against this numerical cap. But if Sherry's in Jamaica and you want to bring Sherry to your club, Sherry would count against the cap. Okay. What's maddening about the cap is that there are no metrics tied into unemployment, the economy, anything that relates to your real needs. And so it's a set cap. It hasn't changed for about 30 years, and it is causing some significant problems at this point. Okay, so let me show you the summer season. And I want to show you this for two reasons. One is I just want you to see the demand because it's wild, but also I want you to see that it increased last year. Okay, so for summer season, the summer season demand is so high that the cap gets hit the first day. So remember I said April 1st is this first day of the second half of the government year. The cap gets hit that day. So for a cap of 33,000 that's supposed to last 6 months, the cap gets hit the first day. And you can see for this year, for 2023, the government got 142,795 applications just for April 1st start dates. Right? That the math doesn't work here, guys, right? Now, one thing I want you to see is just the wild demand for summer season. But the other thing that I want you to see, because this is always really helpful to understand, look at the jumps year after year. So from 2021 to 2022, the government saw about a 40,000 jump in the amount of workers, right? That was huge. And then this past year, for the season that's coming up now, they saw about 6,000 jump. So my point here is, as we're about to look at winter, 2 years ago, they saw this huge jump. This past year, they still saw an increase, but it wasn't as dynamic, right? But the problem still persisted. Okay, for you guys, for winter season, 2 years ago, I never used to have to talk about this, and I miss those days so much. But what happened 2 years ago is it affected early December start dates. Last year, it affected early November start dates. And this year, again, remember that summer season jump? I am expecting that we're going to see an increase again. And I'm expecting that we're going to see second, third week of October if the summer is any indication that the cap gets hit. So if you have an October 15th, October 20, in the 20s, I think that's where you're going to see the cap get hit. One of the hardest things for winter season is we don't know when it will be hit, right? When we talk to summer season clients at this point, it's actually easier because I can say to a summer season organization, we know the cap's going to get hit the first day. Let's talk about how you're going to handle that. For you guys, there's this element of we just don't know. And that creates its own struggles in terms of trying to decide how you want to handle things, especially because a lot of you have longstanding workers that you want to bring back who might want to go home or might need to go home. But the other thing is, and I just want to quickly touch on this, the government, when we file with the Department of Labor, we have no control over how fast they process things. It's another one of the things that just drives us crazy. The Department of Labor is supposed to adjudicate within 7 days, which is laughable because for summer season right now, they're over 3 months in terms of processing. So we have no control over how fast they go. And so what ends up happening is, and this is helpful to understand, like when inevitably you guys all talk to one another, there are going to be some of you that have an earlier start date or a later start date that gets in and some of your peers won't, right? Like some of you are going to miss the cap and you might have the exact same start date, but you'll see some clubs get in and some won't. And the reason why is it really depends on how fast the Department of Labor moves, and some officers move faster than others. But as a general rule, use these dates that I'm kind of telling you as a indicator of what you should be afraid of. And what I'm afraid of for next year is mid-October. I will also tell you, I am very nervous for 2 years from now that we're going to be talking about October 1st, the cap getting hit. And them doing a random lottery, but we'll talk about that a year from now. Now, the government has tried to fix, I'm going to use air quotes, the government has tried to fix these issues, and they actually instituted this new thing for this year, where what they've done is the government's added more visas each year because they understand that that the 66,000 total, right, 33,000 for each season is too few. One of the problems is, in order for there to be permanent change, it has to go through the normal bill making process of the House and Senate approving it, and then the president signing off. We all know what it's like to get anything through at this point in our government, right? Nothing's happening. And especially when it comes to immigration, no one wants to have their name tied to an immigration bill right now. I will actually tell you, I work with a lot of lobbyists. Like, I just, in our, not at my firm, but just in our daily life, we're constantly talking to lobbyists and congressional representatives. I've never seen them I've never seen them give up to the point that they are now. Usually I think they have false hope that there'll be cap reform. At this point, none of them think it's going to happen from who I've spoken with. And so where we are is where it's likely going to be, which is this set cap and the government doing these annual fixes with allocating more visas. Now, when you're looking at this slide, it looks really good, right? What the government did this year is they announced an entire year of cap relief. And what they did is they essentially doubled the cap, right? The cap is 66,000. They added about 65,000 additional. But for winter season organizations, look when they did this, right? They announced that they would be doing it in mid-October, and then they didn't even roll out the timing and details until mid-December, at which point we still had to file with immigration, and then workers had to go into the consulates and embassies overseas. So by the time that workers could come in, realistically, it was end of January. In the absolute perfect world, most people weren't coming until February, March. My point here is, when I talk to summer season organizations, I actually think cap reform is pretty helpful at this point. We actually filed a huge batch of cap petitions yesterday for summer season, and it's March 15th today. So, you know, for them, some of them realistically could get workers in early May. But for you guys, most of you need workers really, you know, the holidays and then January, February. And if you don't have the workers by then, for most of you, it doesn't make sense to bring them back. So my point to you is, while cap reform sounds good, and while I think it's going to be around for the foreseeable future, I don't think that this is a real solution for Florida's clubs. I think what you're looking at is either hoping that you get your petitions in under the cap and bring in workers from outside the country, or doing these in-country transfers. But I don't think cap relief truly does work for you. All right. So I do think that the cap's going to be hit for October start dates. I do. I think that this is a real change. A lot of our clients in Southwest Florida have November start dates. On the East Coast of Florida, a lot of you have October 1st, but I would be really careful. And I will tell you, almost every one of our clients is adding petitions and adding people because no one can find Americans. And there's a lot of new clubs and new organizations doing H-2Bs. Every year for the last 3 years, I've been surprised. I hope I'm not surprised again, but you all need to be careful, and you need to have some plans around the cap. All right. This is not what it's been in the past. And also, for what it's worth, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I will be on this one. All right. So let's talk solutions, because that all sucks, right? Now that I've just like ground you into the ground, let's talk solutions. So as a business owner myself, okay, I always think of in-country transfers as a real solution, because with in-country transfers, these are workers that are cap exempt. These are the Beths that are up in Cape Cod working for the summer that want to move to you for the winter, right? They don't count against the cap. You don't have to worry about government delays at consulates and embassies. Essentially, what you're looking at is, when does the northern organization, when is their end? When is your start? You want to try to minimize gaps and overlaps, which I'll talk about in a second. But the idea is that that you can bring workers in and you don't have to worry about whether or not this cap gets hit. Now, there's some downsides to this, okay? There are, just like there's unprecedented demand for H-2Bs, there's also unprecedented demand for in-country H-2Bs. And so what's happened here is recruiting headaches, where workers are backing out of offers, they're driving up wages, they're just driving you crazy. One of the things that I will tell all of you is, I think that one of the biggest issues that I see with Florida clubs is a lot of you have these long-standing relationships with other organizations in the North, and a lot of you are unwilling to try new partnerships. And what that means is you're stuck in these relationships where, first of all, more and more people are going to those organizations, right? Like you can't force workers to come to you, obviously, but also you're all published online, right? When you file an H-2B, it's public information of who files. So it's very easy to figure out who does stuff. And people are going to be going after the workers at each organization anyway. But also a lot of your start and end dates, there's either gaps or overlaps with your northern counterparts that in the past you've been able to kind of, I don't mean this in a bad way, but kind of like bully them in a way of saying, guys, you need us, right? For the summer, you've had cap issues. We haven't. We're not going to release them. And now that's not the case as much, where you really do need each other. And we're seeing more and more of an issue where when there's overlaps, it's causing these big problems. So one of my real tips is you need to expand your partnerships with northern organizations where you can say to them, hey guys, we need cooks. Who would be a good fit for us? And this was the entire premise of Seasonal Connect when we first started. So this is a great platform to be able to expand your partnerships and create new recruiting channels for you where the dates align much better for you. All right. But regardless of if you use Seasonal Connect or not, you definitely need to expand your recruiting base. All right. Now, one thing I will say, one question I get a lot of is there's unprecedented demand for H-2Bs. Isn't there, how are there enough H-2B workers in the country for in-country workers? But remember, right, they keep adding so many visas. Like this year, they're adding about double the amount of H-2B visas. So there's going to be more in-country workers than there ever have before too. And they've added a lot of visas each year prior. All right. But the thing that you need to understand with gaps and overlaps, and this goes back into the partner thing, you want to go here, right? And this is more with summer days, but it's irrelevant. It's more from a understanding piece. You want to strive for this green light scenario where the worker is coming from an organization, their visa ends on April 30th, your petition starts May 1st, right? There's no gap, there's no overlap, they bookend each other perfectly. On the yellow light scenario, there's overlap where, look at this, right? Visa ends April 30th, new visa starts April 1st, there's a 30-day overlap. In this situation, no one wins, right? This organization needs them through April 30th, this organization needs them April 1st, and the worker can't be in two places at once. This sucks. And this is where there's negotiation. This is where the department heads can create so many problems by where if you agree to something and they overrule you, it could be bad. This isn't great, but from a petition standpoint, we can get this approved. The green light and yellow light, from an immigration lawyer standpoint, we can get these approved each time. I'm not worried about denials. This is where we struggle, and this is new, right? And this goes into another theme of if something worked in the past, it doesn't mean it's still going to work. So visa ends April 30th, new visa starts May 15th. Guys, don't do this. In the past, what we would do is we'd file by April 30th and the government would forgive this 15-day gap. Now what they're doing is they're being inconsistent. And sometimes they're approving this, but sometimes they won't approve it and we have to take the worker off the petition. And it causes delays and stress and you lose a spot essentially. You want to be avoiding these gaps. And a lot of you might be saying, but it worked last year. And I'm saying to you, it's a change. This is something that we've seen them really focusing on over the last 18 months. The laws didn't change, but I think the trainings did at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So be really careful with gaps and overlaps because this is more of an issue than it's ever been. All right. Now, for in-country workers, okay, remember I was saying early on that there's a lot of government delays. A lot of what we're trying to do on our side is we're trying to make it so that the government delays don't impact our clients. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by helping clients collect the right documents. Okay. So there are certain things for an in-country worker that you have to collect in order for the government to approve it. And so those things are the immigration documents. That's the passport, the visas, the I-94 arrival document. We then need their resume and experience letter to qualify for them for the visa, right? Because most of you use experience requirements. So it'd be like 3 months of serving experience. This is where we see a problem where some of your opposite season counterparts cause just stupid stress because they won't just give you the experience letter. For our clients, we actually give you the letter for them to put on their letterhead and sign. But we need this is really important because if they don't attest to the experience, then this letter is useless. If someone says that someone has been a worker in good standing, that's useless for the purpose that we're trying to do. We need them to qualify the worker for the role. And then the pay stubs show the pay stubs show that the worker has been here legally working, because just because someone has a visa doesn't mean they're here legally. They have to be working during that time. One of the things that we're telling our clients is that we need their help, right? Again, we're dealing with less time. And so one of my tips for all of you is, if you're going to do in-country, and in-country is definitely more of a pain in the butt, right? In terms of the petition piece, but it saves a lot of time on the back end. And again, as a business owner, I would do this. Make sure you're looking at stuff before you send stuff to your lawyer, right? Don't just pass stuff on. Like, make sure you're making sure that if someone tells you they sent an experience letter, that it's the right experience letter. Make sure that if they say that they sent their visa, that you open the document, just look, do a cursory look that it's the visa. It'll save time overall and help everybody. All right, so let's go into the government delays a little bit, because I just want everyone to understand what I'm talking about. Okay. So the first thing is the Department of Labor. So the Department of Labor has the biggest piece of the H-2B visa process. They are involved for about 4 to 4.5 months of this 6 to 6.5 month process. Again, they are under no time obligation to review things, and it's annoying to say the least. So what you want to be doing is you want to be filing on the first day possible. And you want to be communicating a lot to your workers, because frankly, other than filing on the first day possible and filing with the right documents, and using the right provider where they're putting stuff in that's approvable. Other than that, there's really nothing you can do than sit back and wait and just be ready for the next step. But this is a real thing. And they're actually, right now, today, they're a week behind where they were last year for summer season petitions, which last year was the worst we had ever seen. So it's pretty consistent with what we saw last year. All right, on USCIS, for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, they come in at the end. This is the immigration agency. They're the ones that ultimately approve the petition. Now, you should all be paying the premium processing fee, which guarantees that they're going to review petitions within 15 calendar days. The problem here is, for some reason, they have become very delayed at issuing receipt notices and approval notices, which are very important because, first of all, you need those to onboard your workers, and the workers need those to go into consulates and embassies if they're coming from outside. I know that there's a lot of talk about this and pushing USCIS to get better. It used to be very routine, and it's weird that we even have to talk about this. That being said, the good news here is that USCIS did extend the portability provisions. So this temporary rule that they implemented last year. It's only extended for this next winter season. After that, hopefully they'll extend it again. But what it says is that workers who are transferring to you in country, the Beths from Cape Cod, they can start working as long as we have the receipt notice. We don't need the petition to be approved. Just quick tip here: if you're going to use the portability provision, which is totally fine, make sure you explain to the workers what's going on, because a lot of them don't get it, rightfully so. It's weird. And a lot of them are going to feel like you're pushing them to do something that's wrong, and that's not the case. So just based on last year, just make sure that you explain what's going on so that you make them comfortable. The more comfortable they are, the better they're going to work, the more happy they're going to be, and so on. All right. So to reiterate, guys, this is not the same process that it was even last year. We are in a new time. Government delays, unprecedented demand, deadlines being so important. This is a whole new world of H-2Bs. The pain in the ass that your summer season colleagues have seen with this is what you're now experiencing. Okay. So here's what I mean by this. Okay. Just to expand on this. Cap issues and concerns. What do you do about your start dates? What do you do about your recruiting? What do you do about Sherry, who you want to bring back from Jamaica, who's been with you for many years, and you're not sure if you'll be able to with the cap? A lot of that. demanding in-country recruiting. You have to be active in in-country recruiting. Expecting the workers to just come to you and expecting the workers to show up after you've made offers, that doesn't fly anymore. Constant communication, chasing after workers, that's just part of the game now, okay? The changes in adjudication of gaps of in-country workers. Just because something worked in the past doesn't mean it will again, right? The gaps are a real issue and you need to be careful about that. The rumors of what others are seeing, right? The rumors are going to be the things that drive you crazy. It certainly drives us crazy. But remember, the Department of Labor goes at its own pace and different officers go at their own pace. So a club down the street might have the exact same start date as you, and they might get in under the cap and you might not, and everything might have been done perfectly, but they had a faster officer, okay? Delays at government agencies, including at the consulates and embassies. The consulates and embassies are a crapshoot. Each one goes at its own pace. Each one has different delays. Thankfully, most of them that process H-2Bs are going pretty regularly now, but that can change at a second's notice, as we've all seen through COVID. Uncertainty of cap relief. I said this before, I don't think any of you should rely on it. And I think that if you do, you're going to be doomed to fail. Friends, you have to be organized and meet deadlines. I can't stress that enough. Regardless of who you work with, the provider is unable to help you if you can't meet the deadlines and stay organized, okay? I know for us, we work our butts off to keep people on deadline and on track and organized. But I've definitely seen that a lot of our winter season clients don't always, they see the deadlines as much more optional because they haven't had to adhere to them as much in the past. Those days are done. Organization, communication, and deadlines surrounding in-country worker document review. If you're doing in-country, there needs to be a lot of communication with your provider and with the workers and internally of how you're handling things, deadlines, and so on. But, I just want to stress this. We need, as a provider, we need your help. Missing deadlines now is going to doom you. Not asking questions, just assuming things are going to be the way that they are. That's where it will crush you, okay? Now, and I think I've kind of beaten this one to death, but the deadlines are so important. Now, on the other side of things, I want to show you what we've done, because I think this is important, that it's not just lip service. At our office, we have added an entire team of people just for in-country document review. And we've actually added much more to our management staff. We've actually added 3 new attorneys just since last season, just to service our existing client base. We've had to acknowledge too that this whole world has shifted, and we've needed to up our staff because it's so much more demanding. One of the other things that we've done is we've restricted capacity. We're not taking on every single client that calls. We do these webinars now during the season for clients only, where we make sure that they always understand big picture. So during the petition process, every month we're doing a webinar. What just happened? Where are we now? What's coming? We do a ton of other ongoing educational initiatives. We're actually bringing back Boom. So some of you might remember this. We created our own proprietary software that was separate from Seasonal Connect, but it's free to all clients. And one of the really cool things in there is that it helps clients upload documents into the correct position, the correct person, and it really outlines what we need. So that's coming back, and we're just going to keep adding to that and really helping clients through the process through Boom. And then Seasonal Connect has been a godsend for a lot of organizations to find workers, to expand their recruiting base, their recruiting partners, and so on. So where Seasonal Connect is we have over 20,000 workers in the system now, about 400 employers. We do multiple events a year. We're actually coming back to South Florida in July for an event. But you can learn more and sign up at seasonalconnect.com. And I'm more than happy to send more information to anyone on that. All right. So in closing, before we go to questions, I always like to end with tips. Okay. So here's how to have a successful winter season next year. And I want to say this. I will tell you, with how much negative I've told you today, a lot of that's been to really help you understand that this is very doable if you do things right. If you're just going to kind of treat this as this annoying process that you're doing in the background, you're going to fail. But H-2B visas are really good. And I truly believe it, for any organization, any club in Florida would be really well served to look at this. So don't take today's webinar as a message not to do it. Instead, it's to do the things that are on this slide. Plan. Okay, that's number one. All of you should be doing preseason planning sessions at this point with your provider and with department heads. We've done this. We've tried to do this with every single one of our winter season clients. The more you plan ahead, the more control you have over this process. Because despite what I've said today, there's actually a lot of ways you can have control, but you have to think through it and you have to plan ahead. All right. Again, I've said this line multiple times. I'm going to say it again. Don't assume that things that worked in the past will work again. Even things that worked last year might not work again. Okay. Things have definitely shifted. You have to meet all the deadlines. The deadlines are no longer optional or suggested. They are real deadlines. Provide the right documents. Okay. I know that goes without, I know that sounds obvious, but provide the right documents. Take that extra second to make sure you're providing the right documents. Ask a ton of questions. The more questions you ask, the more educated that you'll be, and the better off you're going to be, even when it comes to planning. All right. Plan for the worst and hope for the best. Okay. And this really goes into the recruiting and the cap. So the question that I would ask if I were in your shoes, and there's no right answer to this question, but how important are your returning workers to you versus filling those open positions? Okay. So using our Sherry and Beth scenario, Sherry's been with you for 3 years and is wonderful, right? But she's from Jamaica and you might not make the cap this year, right? Maybe you have an October 15th start date. Beth has a great recommendation from this club in Cape Cod and is willing to come work for you. Is it worth bringing Beth on instead of Sherry, or is Sherry so vital to you that it's worth taking a chance? And again, there's no right answer there, but the more you plan and the more you ask questions to your provider, the more that you're going to be able to really make a decision on whether to bring in Beth, whether to bring in Sherry, or potentially bring in both. Okay. And then guys, join Seasonal Connect. You need bigger networks. It is such a great resource. The amount of information sharing that we do is huge. We actually, at our conference that we're doing next week, we actually have someone presenting on, they're from outside the club world, but they're at a company where they've actually put in a whole marketing team into their recruiting arm. And so she's talking about different ways that organizations can market their open positions. So there's so much within Seasonal Connect that's not just staffing, but even staffing wise, there are literally thousands and thousands of in-country H-2Bs, thousands and thousands of out-of-country H-2Bs. We're working our butts off to push more and more Americans in. It is a really, really good tool. All right, so we have 13 minutes for questions. I see that a couple of people wrote in. And so I'll read these out and then just keep writing questions into the Q&A box, and I'll answer them as we go. All right, so one question is it okay to promote from a server assistant to a server during the same season, or from a server to a supervisor also during the same season? That's a great question, and the answer is no. Okay, so what the answer here is when we do H-2B petitions, one of the things that we recommend doing is using wage ranges. So we ask our clients, what is the lowest you might pay in the role and what's the highest you might pay in the role? And we will say to a client, we recommend doing a wage range where you can put that on there. What that allows you to do is if someone's crushing it as a server assistant, you can give them more money and keep them happy. But you cannot change their job during the season. The entire application is based on the job description and the job duties you put into it. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you can file for supervisors in H-2Bs. We have a lot of clients that do. So there's nothing stopping you from filing for supervisors, but you cannot do job promotions for H-2Bs during the season. All right. Next question is, I have a question for the hours of work. 35 hours is average for the entire season, or is it that we have to give them 35 hours per week no matter what? Okay, so this is where H-2B visas get a little bit confusing. And this is where using a lawyer is helpful, because there's actually multiple regulations here. So under the wage and hour rules that apply to H-2Bs, you can actually get away with less hours per week. Okay, I quickly glossed over because I I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's not that helpful, because it can actually hurt you. But there is this rule called this 3/4 rule that says that you can pay that you're forced to, on average, pay at least 75% of the hours you petition for during each 12 weeks of the season. All right. Now, so to dumb that down, basically there's a rule that says that you can get away with paying less. Okay. But every year you file for H-2Bs, they look at what you did the prior year. And if you're not getting people to or close to the hours on a weekly basis, they're going to question whether or not you're seasonal. So you are literally shooting yourself in the foot if you can't get them to the hours. So just be really careful surrounding the hours, because really, while there are some opportunities to cut hours, they're really more made for situations outside of your control, the hurricanes, the COVID, the things like that. It's not made for you to lower the hours. That's the last question. The only other thing, well, I'll say this just to see if anyone else asks a question, but guys, if you haven't reached out about H-2Bs and you're planning on doing them for next year, please contact me immediately after this. We are just about at capacity at our office, and you heard me say this, we're truly starting work this week. With the deadlines being so important, don't wait to reach out. Make sure you're reaching out like today. Just send me an email. We can set up a call and go from there. Beth, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. Or Sherry.
Super. Thank you so much, Keith, for helping us out today. And this video will be available and sent to all participants. Once you registered for this session, before you got online, will be the access to your credits, and we will do those automatically. And thank you, everybody, for being here, and especially Keith, for everything you do for us.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.